The professor begins with an impactful and emotional story. Meet Richard, a literature professor about to experience a life-changing revelation. Richard learns he has lung cancer, and his doctor gives him a grim prognosis. He may only have 6 months to live without treatment. Devastated by the news, Richard tries to accept his fate. He goes to work, hoping to continue with his daily routine, but the weight of his diagnosis is unbearable. The story takes a poignant turn during dinner, when Richard sits with his daughter, Olivia, and wife, Veronica, preparing to break the heartbreaking news. Olivia suddenly makes an unexpected confession. She is attracted to girls. Veronica's reaction to Olivia's revelation is unexpected. She laughs dismissively and dismisses it as a passing phase. Richard, attempting to support his daughter, finds himself caught up in a heated argument between Veronica and Olivia. Olivia storms out, feeling hurt and alone. When left alone with Richard, Veronica makes a shocking confession. She has an affair with Henry, Richard's boss. Richard is perplexed, wondering why she would choose Henry, whom he views as ineffective. Veronica explains that Henry possesses a form of courage that she finds appealing, something she believes is lacking in their relationship. As Veronica prepares to leave, she asks Richard what he intends to say during dinner. Richard jokes, with a hint of dark humor, that he was going to apologize for having only 2 eggs. The next day, Richard gives his students a daring and unconventional speech. Standing in front of his class, Richard sends a clear message. He defines the types of students he values and states that those who do not meet these standards are free to leave and will receive a passing grade. For those who decide to stay, the expectations are simple. Read 1 book and write a reflection for their peers. As Richard finishes his speech, nearly all of the students decide to leave, with only a few remaining. Among the remaining students, Richard notices a feminist. He expresses unequivocally that he is not concerned with feminist issues at the moment and dismisses any discussions about gender inequality. Richard abruptly ends class, stating that he needs to take a break to deal with his emotions. With a sense of humor, he casually jokes that any student who knows where to get marijuana can find him in his office. He then exits, surprising the other students by closing the door behind him. Later, Richard goes to a bar and meets his best friend, Peter. Over drinks, Richard tells Peter about his illness and his desire to take a break from work. Peter, who is deeply sympathetic, attempts to console, but Richard is frustrated by the pity and requests that Peter stop. The next day, Richard and Veronica have an open discussion about their family issues. Richard suggests that Veronica avoid discussing their marital problems with their daughter, Olivia. Instead, he allows Veronica to continue her relationship with her lover. At the same time, Richard admits that he no longer feels compelled to remain faithful to her. Their conversation shifts as they spend time together, get drunk, and reconnect in an unexpected way. Later that night, Olivia returns home with a friend and is surprised to find her parents intoxicated. Olivia sees the chaos and decides to leave with her friend, leaving her parents to continue their evening in disarray. That night, Veronica reflects on her reaction to Olivia's confession and feels guilty. The next day, during a lecture, Richard meets with the few students who have chosen to remain in his class. He asks a student named Clara to introduce herself, only to find out that she is Henry's niece. Henry, the man Richard's wife is involved with. Clara admits that she also has a strained relationship with her uncle. In a moment of camaraderie, Richard suggests they all go to the pub. At the pub, Richard has a heartfelt conversation with the young students, sharing his life experiences and advice. A waitress approaches the table, and Richard flirts with her, to which she returns with a mischievous grin. Richard raises a toast, joking about having to cheat on his wife. As Richard heads to the restroom, he has a brief flirtatious encounter with the waitress. Meanwhile, Veronica appears to be enjoying her time with Henry. When Richard returns to the table, he requests that his students leave a generous tip for the waitress, capping off their lively evening. Richard's recent actions have left his students stunned. Later, at a family dinner, Richard tries to mend his relationship with Veronica by offering a heartfelt apology. Olivia, their daughter, accepts the apology, signaling a moment of reconciliation. As the new school day begins, the feminist student addresses Richard and the other students. She shares her thoughts on the assigned readings, and Richard notices a positive shift in her attitude. In a lighter moment, a student enters Richard's office and presents him with a free brownie infused with marijuana. Richard expresses his gratitude and decides to try the treat, bringing some levity to his day. The student who brought the brownie makes a bold move. He continues to flirt with Richard, suggesting that they have some fun together. Richard, intrigued and playful, asks the student to pour him a whiskey and accepts the unconventional offer. At home, Richard has a heartfelt conversation with Olivia. He asks if she is happy with her girlfriend, and Olivia responds enthusiastically, confirming her happiness. Richard, moved and proud, expresses his pleasure at his daughter's contentment. Back at the college, Richard leads his remaining students outside to the lawn. There, they consume illegal substances and alcohol, pushing the limits of traditional classroom activities. Peter decides to intervene because he can no longer stand by and watch Richard self-destruct. He takes Richard to a cancer support group, hoping that it will provide some comfort. However, after hearing other patients' stories, Richard dismisses their experiences, claiming that their time is too valuable to waste. Richard suggests a different approach. They all go out and enjoy themselves. His offer is met with reluctance, as no one wants to join him. Undeterred, Richard says goodbye to the group and goes to a pub with Peter. As they get drunk, Richard shares a radical idea with Peter, revealing his most recent thoughts and intentions. Richard, tired of waiting for the inevitable, decides to embark on a journey. Clara walks into the pub while he is thinking about his next move. In a moment of spontaneity, Richard sends Peter home in a taxi while staying behind with Clara. Clara offers Richard another drink, and the evening turns lively when she requests a song for them. Amidst the music, Richard tells Clara about his terminal diagnosis. Clara, clearly moved by Richard's story, expresses her admiration and invites him to dance. Clara leans in for a kiss during their dance, but Richard passes out and collapses before she can. Paramedics rush Richard to the hospital, leaving Clara and the pub patrons stunned. When Richard returns home from the hospital, Veronica expresses concern about his whereabouts. He offers a vague apology, but chooses not to tell his wife about his recent ordeal. The following day at work, Henry summons Richard to his office. In a heated exchange, Henry threatens to fire Richard for his recent disruptive behavior. Richard, undeterred, responds with his own threat. He reveals that he knows about Henry's affair with Veronica and uses this information as leverage. Richard warns Henry that he will reveal the affair to Henry's wife unless he is left alone. Richard demands a sabbatical, and Henry has no choice but to agree. Clara speaks to her classmates about the necessity and importance of love in the world, casting a somber look at Richard. Richard, moved by Clara's words, concludes the lesson with an impassioned speech on the value of living authentically. He emphasizes that living otherwise makes everything pointless. Later, in his office, Richard feels ill. He collapses to the floor, overcome by his illness, a stark reminder of his fragile state. Peter discovers Richard in a weakened state. Peter is deeply concerned about Richard's condition. Richard asks his friend to accompany him to a church where he expresses his emotions and thoughts on life. In an emotional moment, Richard appears to be saying goodbye to Peter. Overwhelmed, Peter begins to cry, and they share a tender embrace, each attempting to provide comfort and solace. Later that evening, Henry organizes a company dinner, which both Veronica and Richard attend. In an unexpected turn of events, Richard approaches Henry's wife and passionately kisses her in front of everyone. Despite the daring display, Henry maintains his composure as if nothing unusual has happened. During dinner, Richard stands up and addresses the audience. He openly admits his illness, using the opportunity to subtly suggest Henry's affair with his wife. Richard thanks Peter for their longtime friendship and confirms his feelings for Veronica. He says he still loves her and is grateful for their time together. As the evening draws to a close, Richard bids Veronica farewell. He encourages her to pursue happiness and embraces her one last time. Veronica, overcome with emotion, sobs as Richard looks at her lovingly. They part ways with a touching final look. Back at home, Richard is packing to leave, but Olivia arrives before he can finish. Olivia is visibly upset after being betrayed by a friend. Richard tries to comfort her by offering her a drink. Olivia notices her father's somber demeanor and inquires as to what is troubling him. Richard then reveals his illness to her, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. As their time together draws to a close, Richard delivers a heartfelt message to Olivia. He encourages her to always stay true to herself and expresses how much he will miss her. Olivia watches from the porch as Richard prepares to drive away. Their last moments together are filled with unspoken emotions. Richard blows Olivia a final kiss before driving away. He pauses at an intersection, gazing into the distance as if debating his options. After a brief reflection, he drives straight ahead, determined to forge his own path. And that's how the film ends. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe to our channel for additional content. See you in the next video. Subscribe for more videos like this, enable notifications, and leave a like to support the channel.